But, we are seeing the signs of an emergent network society. We can definitely say we're not in an industrial society. We're moving through an information age towards something that may be the network society. I think it's about social changes. Because I think that the effects of having persistent, open and non-hierarchical networks, which we now can all connect to and see ourselves connecting to, bring about a social pressure of change, and it's the cultural changes that brings. What I see happening is that I think that we are seeing, and I think it's a very good point, that different cultures and different countries are reacting differently to these global technologies. But greater degrees of connectivity, I don't think, can be denied. And the fact that this is a social shift is indicated by the fact that when you remove the technology, which is what you saw happen in Egypt, for instance, then the networks continue to function in this new social, cultural kind of way. So people, the blurring of the boundaries is very clear. I think you need to recalibrate your privacy machine. You no longer have that professional zone between the public and the private. You're right. Things are either private or they're way out there. There's no such thing as discretion. It's very difficult for politicians. The power operates differently. I come across a lot of middle managers in local government who previously felt that they were trapped in the organisation, and they find the power in their network and they do extraordinary things. And they step outside the organisational boundaries, and sometimes they start to they recommunicate themselves and say, actually, I'm not a civil servant, I'm a citizen as well, and actually I care more about this idea than I care about the structure that I'm operating within. And someone actually said that to me in the course of my research. The open is the new default is that open is complicated. It's about open data, it's about open practices, it's about the sense that you are continually changing because of the speed of change which you're seeing in the technology. That practice has to be open. The fact actually what we're demanding is more open minds. What we're demanding is that if you are connected to more people and you are being affected by more influences, then actually what we're asking for is that our minds are more open and that change can happen. And that's something which is completely at odds, that open minds, that idea that you can always ask the other question, very, very at odds with the way that we actually structurally create and deliver policy, for example. So one of the things you need to think about is how do you make the policy making cycle agile but still robust? So open by default, I think we make an enormous mistake if we trap it in the sphere of open data, because I think it's a lot bigger than that. And I think this fact about citizens wanting direct representation is that I don't think there's any evidence that people don't want to be represented. People do want to be represented, probably by politicians, but they want that sense of connection that they see happening in all other bits of their lives. What you're seeing is a renegotiation of the political space at the same time as a renegotiation of the media space. And what you've actually got is you've got two elites looking at each other and the public getting on with their own thing. It's actually how do you refocus not just the politicians on the public and not just the system on the public, the political and democratic system, but also, how do you get the media looking at the public again and actually thinking that they're not, the phrase gatekeepers, I think, is really critical here because, these elites are used to being gatekeepers. They've got skills that support them being gatekeepers. And yet another sense in which this is all open is that you don't need gatekeepers anymore. I've been working with community engagement people, and we do social network analysis of the communities we're trying to do interventions with. And there's an enormous blockage in the minds of the community engagement folks from the council who they know that if they want to work with the black and minority ethnic community in Brighton, is you have to talk to Doris. I mean, if you don't talk to Doris, you're not allowed to talk to anybody else. And we kind of said to them, actually, we could talk directly to people. It's just not the way that they're used to. They're used to, because the networks previously were hidden, or they weren't open and public and available in the way that the technology makes them, is people get used to this gatekeeper behaviour, and that's gone. It's another sense of open. Is that I think you need to look at three. Actually, can I add an extra thing? We'll do that last really quickly at the end. Is that stop thinking about your laying technology on top of old processes. This has to be about service redesign. This has to be about radical information and transformation of process, not about how can we make some technology do something cool at the front end. None of that. We have to really absorb into our practice this idea of openness. And we need to be able to think in public. We need to be able to share what our influences are. We need to be able to, to open up the potential of having your mind changed at any time. And that is I find that personally very, very difficult. And and I think that, we're talking about making, we are going to have a smaller state. There is a huge financial road crash coming down the tracks towards local government. We're going to have to ask a bunch of people to be very open about service redesign at the same time as we're also going to tell them there will be no job for them in government. If we don't help people feel okay about this, you're not going to be able to get them to do the redesign that's absolutely necessary. And I think then you want to look at how do we reconnect politicians directly to citizens? How do we make sure that all of those urges to talk to everybody, which includes, politicians want to do this stuff, how do we make them comfortable with doing it in this digitally persistent, open way, rather than the way that so many of them feel so comfortable with, which is actually face-to-face? And part of that is about helping them understand the social signals that we see online. Most politicians will read body language brilliantly, they'll be fantastic in a room, they'll be really good in this kind of context. They don't understand necessarily the social significance of retweeting somebody, or how to give a social stroke online, how to send those messages, which they're so good at doing face-to-face. And if we don't rapidly boot camp them to the point they can do it, then they're not going to be able to be comfortable. And that comfort and that social comfort online is more important than the technical stuff about how do you send a tweet. Forget about that. The little extra thing, and then I'll stop, is think about digital civic space. Okay, I completely agree. Facebook is not a place to do democracy. Facebook is a commercial environment. All of the original design affordances around something like Facebook are about selling advertising. And we also know that they talk about radical openness. They have Mark Zuckerberg, he doesn't believe in privacy. So we're trying to do this stuff in places which are designed to do something fundamentally different. And we know that design matters in terms of, like, I thought your point about the code, about where, what makes technology. Lex informatica, code is law. How we use it creates a narrative and it shapes a place around it. But still, you've got if it quacks like a duck and it walks like a duck, it's probably a duck. But Facebook is an advertising duck. So if we're going to really push this out into the world, if we're going to use the augmented reality, if we're going to find the ways of actually making this amazing thing work for democracy and for civil society, we need to think about what digital civic architecture actually looks like. How are we going to build the commons out on the digital space? We need to start creating the digital architecture which is going to make participation and democracy endemic.
What do you mean by we?
Well, as many people as I can influence with this idea as possible, basically. But I want to change the way that government thinks about this. I think that national governments need to start considering internet legislation in quite a different kind of way, and not think about it in the kind of it's about the data, or it's about the, it's about, like, what are the porn people doing. They need to start thinking that they're laying the foundations of the infrastructure which society will flourish on, we hope, for a number of years. And at the moment they don't conceive of it like that because they're still seeing the internet as something which is laying over the old processes. And until you start thinking, no, we're building something new, you're not going to make that change. So that was me.
Wow.